sometimes landlords it's a dirty word. We get a bad name, real estate developers. Oh, you're just fat cats, lining your pockets. I truly believe that there's nothing more patriotic than building housing.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec and really all over North America, because we're not just Quebec-centric. Today, it's a pleasure and an honor to have Mr. Brad Cartier back on the show. Hi, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing well, Axel. It's great to be back. How are you?
I'm doing well. I have a bit of a sore throat, but that's all right. And I'm happy to have you back on today. You are the author, I don't know how you call yourself, but I get a weekly email from you called the Briefcase and now Briefcase Plus, and you can discuss a little bit more about that, where you do some real estate news, and I actually read it. And I find you always come up with some really good points. And that's why I wanted to have you on today, because we have a few things to discuss. So for those who aren't aware, what is Briefcase?
Briefcase is a weekly newsletter about all topics real estate related. A lot of focus on the U.S. markets, but as you know, Axel, what happens down in the U.S. definitely affects us up here in Canada. I'm based out of Ottawa, so definitely a North American-focused real estate newsletter that tries to look at the things that are happening in the world of real estate, but sort of put in an investor's perspective on it, and trying to sort of cut through all the political drama that's going on in housing and all that kind of stuff. So we you read it, so we have a lot of fun writing it. It's not your typical newsletter. We like to make fun of ourselves and crack a few jokes here and there. So it's just sort of like a conversational type newsletter for those who love real estate, like me.
Yeah, well, like me and like most of our listeners. And what I like about it is that it's serious, but yet you don't take yourself too seriously. And as you say, you kind of joke about yourself and all that. And I quite enjoy it. And so amongst the many things we're going to discuss, there was an article this week that you published called, the introduction was Vibe Session. Can you just enlighten us? What was that about?
Yeah, so Vibe Session is sort of the colloquial term that people are throwing at this, but essentially there was a Gallup poll done over the last couple of weeks, and it was reported on first by The Guardian, which is based out of the UK, but really capitalizing on sort of the political atmosphere in the US, asking people, do you feel like we're in a recession? Is unemployment high? Is it low? And it was very interesting findings. And essentially, the majority of people, I think it was 56%, said that, in the US, and we can talk about Canada after, I have some opinions about that. In the US, the majority of them thought that they were in a recession, when technically we're not currently in a recession, which is two quarters of negative GDP growth. And if you look at that from a political standpoint, it was an overwhelming amount of people who identified as Republican felt like we were in a recession, but still quite a few of Democrats as well felt like we were in a recession. And the whole tone of the article is, and the media picked up on this like wildfire. It's like, well, the population is out of touch with economic reality, and how could they think we're in a recession? We're not actually in a recession. The overwhelming majority of people in the polls said they felt unemployment was at a 50-year high, when in fact it's extremely low right now. I think it's 4%, same in Canada. So it was a really interesting article around how people felt, the political spin that they put on it. And what we wanted to talk about, the vibe session, what is the vibe? Are we in a vibe session? Because I actually personally believe that economic data matters, but what people feel, I think, matters just as much, if not more. So if people feel like we're in a recession, they're behaving like we're in a recession, I would suggest we could be in recessionary times, because people are, not spending, they're not going out, they're hoarding their money, all that kind of stuff. So I just thought it was a really interesting article to riff on for Briefcase.
It was, and as you say, it's how people feel regardless of the quarterly economic data that is published. And the trouble with that is that then it kind of becomes a self-prophecy, and you kind of alluded to it, because then even if there's economic growth, I mean, it might be in low percentage points, but if people feel like they are in a recession, then they spend less, and there isn't as much consumption nationally, and so then it could end up in a recession. And so it's really important. I mean, it's blatant how it's important to show the proper economic data. And as it was shared in the article, like the media also has a big role to play in this, because they've kind of been the vehicle to this economic wildfire that no, the US is not in a recession. Now, what's your take on in Canada? Because sadly, I kind of feel like we're been in the same spot.
Yeah, 100%. And I actually think we know it's worse here in Canada. So if they did that poll here in Canada, I would actually suggest that, more than 56% of respondents would say we're in a recession. We have double the amount of consumer debt in Canada as the Americans. As we all know, the interest rates have gone up, which makes that a lot more painful, but there's a sales cycle to that. Like, it takes time for that to catch up. We have 5-year mortgages here in Canada. In the US, they got 30-year mortgages. So they're not actually feeling as much economic pain as we are. So I think in Canada, things are actually probably much worse. And I actually think we're probably just in the early innings of recessionary times here in Canada. So I find it very informative from a real estate investment standpoint. And yeah, we're the first in the G7 countries to lower our interest rate. We have the highest consumer debt. So things aren't great in Canada, and I don't think things are going to get better before they get worse.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary. So obviously, scary times are opportunities for investors. Those who say like, "Oh no, prices are too high right now. I'm going to wait that interest rates go down to be able to enter the market." I mean, those days are long gone now. But seriously, how do we see this play out in the next even year? I mean, no one has a crystal ball. We don't work for the Bank of Canada. And before I say that, I was reading a report by RBC saying that they foresee 1 point lowering for this year, and then another point in 2025. So we'd be at a neutral 3% for end of 2025. God knows what's going to happen with the consumer debt that you described. They're in a bit of a rush to do this.
Yeah, 100%. And when the smart folks at RBC are saying that rate cuts are going to be even steeper than what the Bank of Canada is saying, that they're forecasting some serious pain, and it's just starting. So, I mean, from a real estate standpoint, it's tricky because housing supply and new construction is so lagging demand that housing prices are not going to go down. At least, nationally, everything's localized. I get that. I have those conversations with people all the time, but housing prices, asset prices of multifamily commercial are not going down. Take office out of that equation for now. But so, sitting and waiting for the interest rates to lower is a bit of a double-edged sword, because yes, interest rates are going to be lowered, but you might be paying a higher asset price when the time comes. So I think like right now, the smartest investors I know, including myself, it's a little bit of a batten down the hatches kind of perspective. It's like, sit on your cash, see what's going to happen. If you are going to acquire, you have to be a lot more thoughtful about your debt stack because of where interest rates are. And the developers and investors that I'm seeing going bankrupt now, which is absolutely terrible. It's mostly the ones who got in during the decade long zero interest rate height that happened in across the world. Where investing in real estate at that point with interest rates so low just made sense. I hate to say it, but a monkey could have made money over that decade because real estate assets went up.
It was so easy.
It was so easy. So everyone thought they were a genius. And then now, when it's a little bit harder and you have to, your interest rates are doubling and you're over leveraged, there's going to be a lot of blood in the water. So, like you said, there's opportunity for those who are well capitalized and very thoughtful about what their debt stack is going to look like.
Yeah. So how has this been impacting the projects that you're working on? Because you have some developments going on, you do some construction, you're running some recreational, such as campsites. You also do some tiny homes. Like, you're very involved in different segments. How has this been impacting your market? And I was going to say on this tier 2 question, Is the tiny house business booming given the affordability crisis?
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk about tiny homes because I'm very passionate about that. But on your first point, the impact is dramatic and it's painful. Thankfully, we didn't overextend ourselves. We stress tested during the good times out of an abundance of caution, but still very painful. Our construction financing, in the mid teens is never a great thing for your pro forma. So we got through a few construction projects over the last year, and we got to the finish line. But that takeout on the back end is a lot different when the interest rate that we get is not 3%. So we've been fortunate as well because we've leveraged some CMHC financing, which allows for some reduced rates, some extended amortizations, et cetera, et cetera. So the incentives, and that's another caveat to my earlier point about it's tough times. It's also going to be good times for developers over the next decade. In a political atmosphere where politicians can't agree on anything, the one thing they can agree on is we need more housing. We need more affordable housing, whether you're red, white, blue, pink, orange, whatever. So the incentives coming down for, again, developers who are well capitalized and thoughtful about their debt stack are going to be immense. So incredible opportunity in the pipeline, and that sort of feeds into the tiny home. I own with a business partner a company called Small Living Company, and we build tiny homes. I've started to use the term starter home a lot more. I find it's a little bit more politically digestible for towns when you're talking to them about housing. They don't like tiny homes, but if you call it a starter home or an affordable home, they're okay with it. All of a sudden, it's
such a good semantic play.
Yeah, and I mean, Axel, you deal with municipalities on a regular basis, so it's all about messaging. So. We've built, just in the past year, we've built 20 tiny homes. We have a lot of orders in the pipeline as well. We're seeing a lot of municipalities provide incentives for more affordable communities. Our starter homes start at $200,000, and our most expensive is $400,000. When the average price in Canada right now is $800,000. So these are, there's on helical piles or on grade, so they can be traditionally financed. It's such a shame. It's such a national shame, that we can't house, people here in Canada. We have so many great things in this country, but the fact that someone has to spend $1 million who just got out of college and is having a family and has now a mortgage of $5,000 a month, it's an absolute travesty. So we're that's our mission at Small Living Company, is to try and help solve the affordability crisis, and we're doing it.
Wow. So as you said that about the national house prices, I was thinking of a friend of mine in Vancouver, very bright individual, lawyer. His wife is a nurse, and they were living in Vancouver for some time, starting a family. They had to move. They went on the island of Vancouver because it was just unaffordable. And this is a smart couple, good incomes. They can't house themselves over there. And obviously Vancouver isn't representative of all of Canada, but it's just really crazy, the reality that we see now. And from an economic point of view, population growth. We had, due to immigration. Also demographic changes where now there's more people leaving the home earlier and so on and so forth. We can talk about all those factors, but the reality is that it's a supply issue. We are not building enough. And the CMHC was saying, I think it was 3.5 million dwellings by 2030. Whereas, I forget what we build on a good year, but it's such a fraction of that it's laughable to see what we're going to need. So, I'm an immigrant here. I love this country. I got my citizenship 10 years ago. I'm extremely grateful. And it breaks my heart to see what we're going through. And I've also seen more and more immigrants. Sorry, because now I'm taking the conversation somewhere else, but I'll come back to real estate. I've seen more and more immigrants that have arrived in the last, I'd say, 3 to 5 years, who are now leaving Canada, saying it's not what we were told, or actually the standards of living are not as good as we thought, or it's actually more complicated, or and often it relates to affordability. And I find it breaks my heart because it's a nation that needs immigration, that needs good qualified people, and yet they have to leave because rents are too high.
Yeah, no, it's such a great point, Axel. And I think As sometimes landlords it's a dirty word. We get a bad name, real estate developers. Oh, you're just fat cats, lining your pockets. But I truly believe that there's nothing more patriotic than building housing. I mean, having roofs over people's heads that they can afford so they can live their lives, like that's what we need to all be thinking about. And it goes back to the political thing. That's what all parties are asking for as well. So the incentives in the pipeline are going to be already are immense and are going to be even greater.
I'd love to hear your experience on this, on dealing with cities in Ontario. I've only done projects in Quebec, so I don't really know outside of those boundaries. You have a lot of experience in Ontario. In our experience here so far, and we've done building permits with multiple municipalities. It's more than what I say months. I'm not talking 3 months. I'm talking like it took us 9 months to get a renovation permit to renovate a fully vacant fourplex. Okay, and so the difficulty that it is with municipalities, especially when it comes to permit, is a massive deterrent because as developers and builders, time is our enemy. How has been your experience in Ontario? And do you feel like as a province, there's actually an effort to be helping out small builders like us?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I kind of feel spoiled. I've dealt with the city of Ottawa, and it's been a nightmare. It's a black hole. Same experience you described. My development company focuses on secondary and tertiary markets in the Ottawa area. So it's smaller municipalities. It's people you can call up. You can go have lunch with them. Which at big cities never happens. You have to wait for your development review committee meeting and the official meetings and things like that. So our home base is Clarence Rockland. And the city here has just been absolutely fantastic, very accessible. We got a official plan amendment done for a project that we did in something like 10 months. And and that's above zone. Like that's the hardest thing to change is an official plan. So we've gotten zoning changes done even sooner, and our permits are quicker as well. So I actually feel spoiled as a developer, and I hate telling my developer friends about it because they just look at me like, shut up, don't talk about that because they're jealous.
Well, it's not just luck. It's also a testament to the quality of your work and how serious, and the community does recognize the value of the work you bring.
Yeah. And I think if municipalities had that mindset, like we are your clients, like as much as I hate paying development charges that are $20,000 a door, if you enable this and move it faster, like municipalities are screaming for infrastructure money, they're out of money, they're going bankrupt. The city of Toronto is going back to the province asking for loans. Like it's crazy that like the way you are going to get to profitability as a municipality is to enable more development, bring more people into your tax base. And the way to do that is provide them with housing, and the housing developers are providing you with development charges. So like you should be treating these people like gold because they're the gravy train for you.
Yeah. Well, maybe you should go work for the city a little bit.
I used to work for government, and I'll never go back. I like it in the private sector.
Well, as a thing, the smart ones leave. So yeah,
I won't comment on that.
Yeah. Now I always like to think about the future because I'm future focused and a very optimistic person by nature. Where do we see this going? And obviously we're not going to get into the political part of it, even though it does play a big aspect. As a nation, I'm sometimes worried, and especially for Quebec, because Quebec is a separate country, literally within Canada. Yep. But anyways, what do you think?
I'm like you, Axel. I'm optimistic, and actually on this topic, I'm fairly optimistic. Although the cycle on it is going to be probably generational, but I think over the next couple decades, things are going to get a lot better because there is that recognition that, and you said it earlier, the only way to improve housing affordability is supply. Like plain and simple, you have to build more. That's going to bring prices down, rents and resale prices. And again, this is a developer saying it. Like, I don't mind that rents are high. I think it's a travesty, but it's good for my.
It's good for us.
Good for my bottom line. But at the end of the day, I'm patriotic, and I want people with roofs over their head that they can afford. So I think that even in just the past couple of years, like Ontario passed Bill 23, which essentially upzone the entire province to 3 units. So now by legal right on any R1 lot, for the most part, you can do a triplex. You don't have to get rezoning. So there's a lot of gentle densification. The government waiving the federal portion of HST on rental housing. What CMHC is coming down with, the increase in federal funding for CMHC bonds, so they can lend more to developers. And there's a number of other things that are in the pipeline. I'm optimistic that as rates come down and stabilize over the next couple of years, and like I said originally, I think the next couple of years are going to be even more painful than they are now. So,
what makes you say that? Because I would have thought that rates are going to decrease. We're going to start to build more. There's going to be more availability. Now we have a labor shortage, but that's also going to resolve itself a little bit. As how do you see this play out? What do you say it's going to be worse before it gets better?
Well, like I mentioned before, it takes time for heightened interest rates to filter its way through the system. So, they started their aggressive rate hiking cycle 2 years ago. We have 5-year mortgages here in Canada. So yes, some people are starting to feel the pain because they have to remortgage at 6% instead of 1.5 was my last home mortgage, which is insane to say right now. So as these mortgages come up for maturity this year, next year, and 2026, that's when you're going to start to see the pain. And credit card interest rates have gone up as well. So because our consumer debt is so high in Canada, and because the cycle on the interest rate being felt in the economy is going to take time, I think we're at the beginning now of it starting to be painful. And we've seen it in the news reports. We had record small businesses bankruptcies in Canada in the last quarter. It's insane. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because that cycle of the interest rate pain is still yet to be felt over the next year, probably 2 years. But then after that, it's going to get better as rates stabilize.
Okay, and I understand. And you're right. Like, even if, let's say, they were going to lower by another 25 beeps before the end of the year, there's still plenty of businesses that are going to go down, because over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been accumulating so much debt, and now they just can't do it anymore, even if rates are on the decrease.
100%.
Yeah. And when it comes to supply, you're right that even though interest rates are going down, it's still going to take 1.5 years for the construction machine to go back to full speed. And that is, there's a huge lag. And then those units are coming on the market in 2.5 years, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a slow moving beast. I like what you said about, this is a generational thing. It's true that I don't really think about those. It's not that I don't think about it in terms of generations, but because for me, a generation is like 20 to 25 years. But, I like to think that by 2030, we're going to be in a better spot.
I think we will be. I honestly think we will be. So again, all these incentives are meant to encourage supply. And, the more supply we get on the market, and, the better it's going to be for the homeowner and the renter. But exactly like you said, there's a delay effect, and it takes a while, because it takes a while to build these projects and to get entrepreneurial like people like us who are like, okay, I'm a developer. Now it makes sense. Okay, I'm going to press play today. It's still going to take 2 years for me to get that 18 unit to market, given all the red tape and regulations. But even that, they're starting to slash, and the federal government is tying funding to municipalities to how long your permitting process takes, which I think is great. They've been doing that in the US for forever. So I think we're starting to learn from the American experience, and I think it will get better, but not tomorrow.
No. So we can continue to be optimistic and continue hard to work in that direction, but we don't control everything.
Right.
So for the real estate investors that are listening and who would like to subscribe to Briefcase, which, by the way, I highly encourage, what's the best way to do so, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so just briefcase.email, go subscribe. It's free. We do have premium options, but the vast majority of our content is free. And like I said, we have a lot of fun writing it. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, the emails from Briefcase come out from my personal email. So if you just reply to any of the emails, I will get it. I'm also on LinkedIn. Happy to chat anytime with anyone about anything real estate. I'm obviously passionate about it.
And by the way, and this, I was going to say, what you just said is absolutely true. Because when you had sent the email with the vibe session this week, and I literally answered, I think it was the same day, like, hey, I really like this article. Can you please come back on the podcast so we can discuss this? Like, you responded within 2 to 3 hours. So you do get back very quickly. And I highly encourage people to write to you and comment.
Yeah, would love to chat with people.
Yeah. Brad, it's been a pleasure to have you on today. I really like your mindset and this conversation. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, and I look forward to having you back on the show in the future. You are a guest anytime.
Thanks, Axel. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. For all those who are listening, share this episode with a friend who could enjoy this conversation. And again, keep researching your market, make some offers. I'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much.